You're watching Beyond Markets, where we bring you up to speed on development outcomes in Africa. I'm Kenneth. Igbomor. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Today, our focus is on intra-Africa trade, and in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic, as the delay of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement takes center stage. You can join the conversation on social media and let us know what you think. You can also let us know what you think. The hashtag to use is Beyond Markets, and you can also hit me up at Kenneth Igbomor and at CNBC Africa to get in touch. Now, the acting executive director of the International Trade Center, Dorothy Tembo, says that the coronavirus pandemic could represent a risk for the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, but African leaders could also turn that into an opportunity for stronger collaboration if specific policies are fast-tracked. She joins me now for more insight on this discussion. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today, Dorothy. And I'll first like to get your assessment of the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact on Africa.
Thank you very much for having me, and indeed a pleasure for me to share with you our perspective of what we are seeing from the data that we are assessing at present. Clearly, we are in a very unprecedented period, and clearly it's a time where we are seeing definitely that there is a decline on imports as there is on the export side. Overall, globally, we are already seeing that there is an impact in sectors such as textiles and footwear, where we have 24% decrease, and in other sectors as well. On the import side, we are seeing a replication of a decline on the vehicles, for instance, on machinery and equipment. For Africa in particular, we see that there's going to be a huge impact in a number of areas. And the same can be said for many of the sectors that I've alluded to, textiles and clothing. We are in a similar situation in terms of the statistics already starting to show a reduction. And I want to stress here that for Africa, we are only starting with that curve. And it's very clear that we are going to get perhaps in a more wanting situation than we are at present. But even as we are already seeing that the demand for African exports is decreasing, and so are on the import side as well. There is a decrease on that side. So this is potentially a huge problem for Africa, which Africa has to brace itself for. But as you rightly said in your introductory remarks, it is also an opportunity for Africa to take a relook, reevaluate a number of things, and see what it is that can be done. As an organization, we have undertaken to... I was just going to say that as an organization, we've taken the immediate step of reaching out to beneficiaries that we work with to try and establish precisely what is happening on the ground, because that's critical to us finding the right solutions and being able to support in the right way. 74% of those that were part of the survey that we undertook are saying they are going to be negatively impacted. They're already saying they can't pay their bills, which includes salaries as well as rent. They also cannot be able to access resources that will enable them to sustain themselves, because they are already in a situation where their capital is very limited and they have the risk of shutting down. Shutting down has huge implications in terms of trying to restart the business beyond the crisis. So what we need to try and do is make sure that we are finding the right solutions to support them as a minimum for them to be sustained, but more so being forward-looking and trying to find a good way of ensuring that they indeed contribute to the recovery process.
No doubt businesses are going to be adversely impacted by this, but like I read in your article that you put out earlier last month, you're talking about the fact that African leaders could also turn this into an opportunity, and I would like to get into that opportunity here and get some idea from you what kind of sort of specific policies we can see put in place there that could help, that could be fast-tracked to help, cushion the blows from the impact of this pandemic.
Absolutely right. Again, I think this is a time for Africa to rethink and reposition itself. What is it that we are seeing from the work that we are doing? part of what we are seeing is that there is a shift in the demand in the context of the different value chains that African companies or businesses are involved in. For instance, I'll give you a case in point, particularly on the health side. We've had a shift in production from textiles and garments to production of masks and other public health related products. That in itself is an opportunity. So are there more opportunities that Africa could critically look at and try to see how it repositions itself to take advantage of the emerging environment? It is a dark moment for Africa in terms of the public health impact, but it is also one that demands that on the economic side, we are not losing track on the efforts that are being made, particularly with respect to the Continental Free Trade Area. I believe that the integration of the continent still has to proceed because that's what's going to create opportunities for the African countries.
Definitely, the blow coming from that delay in the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. But definitely, I'd like to get you to speak more extensively on that and get your thoughts on how you think the continent should proceed with this important trade agreement.
Where we are right now is that we have 200 what is being called temporal measures have been put in place. Of course, some of these are looking towards further liberalization to make it easier to access the requirements for this special situation that we find ourselves in. But the majority of those measures are actually becoming more restrictive. And I make reference to them as being temporal because this is my understanding at this point. And I would hope that countries are really going to look at it in that way, because the solution to the current situation is not to close borders, but to make sure that we are facilitating trade. It might be facilitating trade in different ways. Second aspect is I've also seen that there are export measures being put in place in relation to the food sector. My key concern there is that this might turn out to be an issue of food crisis, and that we lose focus on the many other elements that are equally important for making sure that Africa is repositioned to take advantage of the opportunities that will arise out of this situation. So the issue should be for us to ensure that we are, of course, very much clear that the public health side has to be addressed and the measures being put in place, rightfully so, but at the same time being cautious that the measures we put in place are not ones that inhibit us from progressing on the trade side, and in particular, the Continental Free Trade Area. I do understand and I'm very much aware of the decision that has been taken not to proceed with the operationalization of the Continental Free Trade Area this July. Understandable reasons, but at the same time, I do believe there are still things that can be done in terms of laying the groundwork for Africa to proceed with implementation as soon as everybody is ready.
Yeah, because Dorothy, you understand that we're in a new normal here, and then things might not even get back to how they were in the past. You know, we're talking about a new normal here of a time of social distancing. We're talking about closed borders here and there. We're talking about lockdowns, even within countries. You know, like in a case in point in Nigeria, where the states are closing borders from even in the same country, and we're not talking about facilitating trade. You know, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how we can make all of this work.
It's new normal in terms of the status of things at present, but I think the new normal should be one that looks at what can we do precisely in terms of overcoming the challenges that we are being confronted with, I beg your pardon. And the issue for me there is that we are critically looking at alternative ways of facilitating trade. For instance, looking more at the digital divide aspect of it, because from the work we have done, we have seen that there is some minimal resilience from some of the businesses that we have been working with, but particularly those that are, facilitating trade through e-commerce. That is what has sustained them. Only last week, we had one of our Ghanaian entrepreneurs actually being showcased on CNN. And precisely, she has been able to survive in this context because she's selling her products via the e-com channel. Is this something that we can look at accelerating in the context of the discussions of the Continental Free Trade Area? Because that would definitely be an opportunity, not only by the larger, small and medium enterprises, but also the very small ones that are not able to reach the markets because of economic reasons. If we can facilitate them to do that trade, the better for all of us. So exploring new ways of doing business, reskilling people to be able to understand that we can actually still support them on the capacity building side through virtual means, and indeed looking at broader aspects such as trade investment facilitation, which are going to be a critical element of all this. But in all this, it remains critical that Africa remains engaged at the multilateral level. It is understandable that countries are looking at being more self-sustaining, but it is also true that Africa cannot stand on its own. It needs the others as the others need Africa. And it has to be that everybody works collectively together. Everybody is in this. We have to make sure that we make it work for a better Africa and a better world.
All right, Dorothy, I needed to hold that thought. Definitely, I agree with you. Definitely, we have to make it better for a better Africa. We'll just hold that thought for a second. We'll take a quick break right now. When we return, definitely we'll continue our conversation. I've been speaking to Dorothy Tembo, the Acting Executive Director of the International Trade Center. I will continue our conversation right after the break. Stick around. Welcome back to Beyond Markets. You're just joining us. I've been speaking to Dorothy Tembo. She's the Acting Executive Director of the International Trade Center. And we've been looking at assessing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on intra-Africa trade, and especially how it affects the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Dorothy, before we left off, I just want to continue, talking about how we can cushion the impact on some of the hardest hit sectors and how best Africa can build that resilient trade ecosystem, to cushion and withstand future shocks, just like the COVID-19 pandemic.
No, this is precisely the conversation I think we were having just before the break. And what I wanted to add to what I had said is that Africa as a continent must obviously look critically into the different value chains that are existent. And in this respect, it is where institutions such as ourselves and, of course, working with others can help in terms of ensuring that the appropriate assessments are done. Why are these assessments important? The assessments will provide the guidance in terms of where the priorities and the specific interventions will be from a perspective of Africa. It's important that Africa is looking at adding value to their own processes in Africa. That is what really matters at present. I know oftentimes there have been conversations around Africa should perhaps close doors, for lack of a better term, and try to be more sustaining.
It's quite a lot, because I want to also get your assessment also from the kind of support we're seeing from international partners, development partners, the international community at large, and how they're supporting, Africa, because we understand that there are countries who are particularly vulnerable. The landlocked countries in Africa are particularly vulnerable, and how we are seeing that level of support coming to help these countries, especially in a time when we're talking about trade across the continent.
For international organizations, and if I may speak for the UN family in particular, we recognize that this is an exceptional situation that demands enhanced coordination and collaboration on the ground. So we have, in the context of the UN, have moved towards ensuring that we have a global COVID-19 response, which is being led by the Secretary General. You may have heard the establishment of a fund. But outside that, it's critically important that we also look at what is existing on the ground. In the case of ITC, we do have projects that are ongoing. We are present in more than 120 countries, and in all those countries, we have projects that are ongoing. Countries have already been coming back to discuss with us as to how we can better adjust the program or the programs or projects to better respond to some of the immediate needs that are available. I mean, that they have been confronted with as countries. And therefore, we are already doing that adjustments. But in addition to that, because we are a capacity building entity, we have also taken a step further by redefining the way we are delivering our services to make sure that we can do this in a context where we are unable to do the face-to-face interaction. So what are we doing? We have webinars, we have different tools that we are making available for countries to better understand. But the bottom line of all this is that we have to remain demand-driven. We have to be responding to the country's needs. But countries, on the other hand, have to also be better engaged and more coordinated at the country level for us as international organizations to be able to respond in a more effective way. So it's a two-way thing. It's the countries, it's ourselves. It's also, I would say it also has to do with those that are providing the financial resources to be able to intervene in the specific areas. Collective effort would be my summary.
All right, let's look. Okay, so let's look at it in a different way now. So first is the international partners, but now I want to now get into, how we're seeing Africa becoming more self-reliant, and we see that how we can see greater cooperation happening between African countries to help, in a time like this when we have a shock that's affecting every country on the continent.
Sure. It is the right thing to do for countries to see how they can collaborate amongst themselves to better respond to the challenges that they are being confronted with, and which is why I still come back to the issue of the importance of the regional integration side of things. I know at present we are not moving forward with the Continental Free Trade Area, but there are many, many other channels which are presently also an integral part of the Continental Free Trade Area, as I would interpret it, such as the regional integration programs that are going on in ECOWAS, in SADC, in COMESA, and all the effort that is being made to try and harmonize the rules and regulations to simplify that collaboration that you're talking about. It's on the trade facilitation, but it's on many, many other aspects as well, which still have to continue being developed or rationalized and used as a stepping stone for the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area. I don't think that work should come to a standstill because the decision has been made to hold on the operationalization of the Continental Free Trade Area.
Yeah, rightly said that, Dorothy, because still quite a lot of going on. We understand that trade negotiations are still going on tariffs and areas like rules of origin. And I'd like to get your thoughts on how we can also fast track that so that even with this delay, when we finally kick off, everything is spick and span.
This is an important piece of work that has to be done by the countries that are party to the negotiations. And as an organization, we've been doing this even before COVID in terms of supporting the negotiations, particularly as it relates to the tariff negotiations, where we have provided a tool that has enabled countries to better understand what is on offer from their side, but also better understand what this would entail in relation to the other countries as well. And we continue on that track. We haven't stopped that piece of work. Rules of origin, of course, countries have to have a common understanding in terms of how goods will qualify as being part and parcel or having been produced within the boundaries of the continent. And here we we have also been contributing to this effort by providing a platform that gives a sense of all the rules and guidelines that are prevailing on rules of origin, but also very much on the standards side. Now, UNCTAD has been central at providing a lot of effort on facilitating those negotiations within the context of the Continental Free Trade Area. As an organization, we're actively working with UNCTAD as we are working with others to also make a contribution to that. But two important pieces of work that have to continue, and within there, the agreement for me has to be one that takes cognizance of where Africa has clarity in terms of the immediate opportunities or the immediate wins that Africa could gain. And that is perhaps where the primary focus should be once the operationalization starts. The sequencing is going to be very, very important. And it is also important that countries understand that it's a process that has to be accommodating, and not that everybody is expecting to have a win from day one, but that progressively each and every country finds its space and its niche where they can actually be able to have gains.
All right, but Dorothy, I would like to pick a little into your and get your thoughts on this. And as we weigh the cost of what it means to miss out on the benefits of the AfCFTA, what could it cost Africa?
It would cost Africa a lot. This is the opportunity. Before COVID-19, we were all talking about Africa being the place where the opportunities lie. We were talking about Africa being the place where you have to invest. And if that is what is seen by the rest of the world, who are all looking to Africa to see what we are going to do in terms of fulfilling that commitment, we would certainly be missing an opportunity that I believe would not be coming round to us in a very, very, in a long time to come. So it's not an option that we try to miss this opportunity. We just have to make it work. And what we have to do in all this is understand that for Africa, micro, small, and medium enterprises are a very critical component. They constitute 90% of business in Africa. They employ 80% of the workforce in Africa. And any solution or any program that Africa undertakes must remember that this is what has to be taken into consideration. How we must make sure that we are fully supporting small, medium enterprises and indeed ensuring that we are responding to their immediate needs, particularly in the context of COVID-19.
Definitely, the small and medium scale businesses are at the heart of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Definitely, I agree with you on that one, Dorothy. And thank you so much for your thoughts and input on the show today. Definitely, we'll definitely like to get more on what the International Trade Center is doing. I've been speaking to Dorothy Tembo. She's the acting executive director of the International Trade Center, and that's all on our show on Beyond Markets for today. And thank you so much for being a part of the show. As always, you can catch all episodes of Beyond Markets at 5 p.m. West Africa time daily, and have access to all episodes on our website. That's at cnbcafrica.com. I'm Kenneth Igbomor. For me and the team, have a wonderful day.